it's scary out there. The system, it's a for-profit system. Do I think we should be socialized? Probably not. I don't know that that works well either. There's got to be something in the middle. I just know what we're doing now is very, very broken.
Hello to all of you beautiful people who are tuning in and listening to the Trip Sitting podcast. I love and appreciate all of you and hope that you enjoy this next episode. Before we dive in, I'm just today that I recorded this. I'm coming off of taking about 2.5 grams of mushrooms at my first fish concert yesterday. And I feel fantastic. I've got a lot of thoughts and opinions on that whole experience, which I will be writing about on Shroomtown. So that might be out by the time that this podcast is released, or it might not, but definitely be on the lookout for that. Now, this guest, Dr. Jonathan M. Fields, is a just brilliant doctor, holistic medicine practitioner, and psychedelic medicine advocate, who is just so knowledgeable about every area that I was able to ask about, and just I was curious about just so many things. So super happy to have him on the show. And if you are at all interested in hearing somebody's advice and opinions who has dedicated the last 20 years of his life to researching all of these topics, this is a great episode to listen to, rather than just listening to me share my opinion based on the very limited research that I have done, just based on my own personal experiences. So I'm grateful to have people like Jonathan that want to come on the show. Before we get started, if you want to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss these episodes, and also if you could give this a rating, however you feel about this, that would be greatly appreciated, so we can get in front of more viewers, and make sure that you're following at tripsitting.blog on Instagram and TikTok, just so you get the clips from these episodes that I feel are important to share. That is all the promotion for now, and here is Dr. Jonathan M. Fields. Thanks for joining me, man. So I really appreciate it. Dr. Jonathan M. Fields here. So you practice in Florida, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, gotcha. And so you do, got some notes here. So you're an acupuncture physician and doctor of oriental medicine at Integrative Medicine US.
Yeah, and we have another clinic, Create Health, that's CR8 Health, and I'm the chief medical officer for New Path, which is a ketamine clinic that's going to be opening soon here in Delray Beach, Florida.
Awesome. So obviously we're going to talk about psychedelics at some point during this, but before we get into that, I want to talk about just more of the other holistic medical approaches that you take, and also kind of ask why you think they haven't caught on as much, and why those approaches are not as popular in Western culture right now.
Well, in Western culture is the good preface for it. Unfortunately, even in Eastern culture, it's kind of, I don't want to say dying, but most of it is westernized medicine now, and throughout the whole East. So, it's growing rapidly. Why it hasn't caught on, I think, partially because there's been a lot of money put in by big pharma and medical device manufacturers to design studies that were created to fail so they could use as propaganda pieces about how these types of alternative medicines and things don't work. And as a lot of old school medical students, as they were going through the training, they were taught this, and a lot of times they frown on it. And which is sad, because the science actually does say otherwise. And sure, we don't have as comprehensive studies as some of the the pharma stuff, because obviously nobody's going to put $1 billion into a study that there's nothing to patent on. So that's another reason. So it's a combination of all these different things, right? It's one, if people did start taking better care of themselves and doing these kind of integrative practices, some of these big corporations would be out a lot of money, right? Because we are, America is 3% of the world's population, something like that. Do you know what percentage of the world's drugs we take?
I'm going to have to guess it's a lot more than 3.
Take a wild guess.
I'm going to go with 20. Up.
Keep guessing.
25, 30, 40, 50. Holy shit, 60?
Yeah, about there. So us 3% of the world's population, we're taking about 60% of the drugs. Does that make us as the healthiest country? Do you think we're the healthiest country? We're
By
not.
no means. Oh
not
my God.
not even close, right? So there's a lot of motivation there. Part of it is also acceptance, I think, of other cultures and other philosophies. Part of it is that. Part of it is a lot of this hasn't been studied thoroughly to our standards. So it's a combination of all those things. However, I will say it is catching on and it is changing rapidly and it's growing rapidly. The market for alternative medicine, whether it be herbs or acupuncture, or massage, functional medicine, all these things, is growing insanely fast. And
Mhm.
people, I don't know if it's making a huge dent in what's going on with our national health problems, but the market share of it is going to increase. It's probably going to double in the next 10 years or so, maybe triple. So there is some stats on it. It's very interesting, but yeah, we're not where we need to be. A lot of these therapies have been around for thousands of years, and they worked.
Yeah. So when you went to school to be a doctor, was
Mhm.
this the path that you originally planned on taking, or did you just kind of end up in this path like, randomly?
No, it's when I started studying for medicine, this is kind of what I wanted to do.
Okay.
I got into studying Eastern medicine and holistic medicine about 20 years ago. I've been in martial arts most of my life, and about 20 years ago, my Qigong master at the time, Dr. George Love, was also an acupuncturist. And every time I got injured training martial arts, he would treat me, and it was always very effective for me for musculoskeletal issues. And then I had about 10 years later, I got fascinated by it. So I started studying with him. I started his Qigong system. Um, and I studied that for about 10 years or so with him. I would intern at his clinic and I would help him with his seminars. Eventually, I was teaching his seminars. We still work very closely together. And in my early 30s, I got super, super sick. I started having hot flashes and chills and fatigue and depression and carpal tunnel and tendonitis and systemic joint pain, every joint in my body, and neck pain and back pain.
Sounds
And I
like you're
spent
going
a
through menopause.
and then some, right? I thought for sure I was like, I must have cancer, AIDS. I was like, I'm dying. I'm not going to make it. It was bad. I was disabled for a year. I couldn't work, and
Wow.
I spent a whole year hopping from doctor to doctor. And I saw a dozen different specialists, neurologists, and oncologists, not oncologists, endocrinologists, orthopedics. Every doctor you can think of, thyroid biopsies, all that kind of stuff. And they all just kept telling me, "Oh, everything's fine. It's all in your head. Here's muscle relaxers. Here's pain pills."
Yeah, yeah. I
The
was, I was, I was gonna say, how many times did they just try to prescribe you something?
uh, Lots, right? And it was
Yeah,
basically just like go home and die, suck it up. And even to the point my family was sick of hearing it. They're like, "Oh, the
yeah.
doctor said you're fine. It's all in your head. Like, stop complaining." Right. And eventually I was able to get better. A practitioner by the name of Reed Eckert, he's a formulator. He actually works with MDs to invent vitamins and nutrients. And he was able to figure it out. And he put me in touch with a good chiropractor by the name of Paul Grillo, who's now retired. And between that and the acupuncture and the herbs, I was able to make 100% recovery. So having lived through that and being super frustrated with the medical system at the time, I was like 31, 32, so it's 12, 13 years ago.
And you're already a doctor
Um,
at this time too.
no, 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 I
Okay.
wasn't. I had been studying the Eastern medicine just through my practitioner, and I was fascinated by it and interested in it. But at the time, I was doing marketing and graphic design and web design, and I was into music. I was a DJ for over 20 years, and we organized breakdancing competitions. And I'm an artist. I paint. I do all sorts of murals and other stuff. So my life was full of all that stuff.
Yeah.
But having gone through that experience and being super frustrated. I was like, I'm early 30s, I'm young, I'm living a pretty healthy lifestyle. I exercise, I was eating healthy, I had health insurance. I was like, why can't I get help? And having lived through that, it made me want to go back and dedicate my life to doing this full time and helping other people in similar situations who are suffering from these chronic condition. And the doctors are just like drugs, drugs, drugs that
Hmm.
don't help you get any better. So then I went back to school, did a bachelor's in health sciences, did a master's, did a doctorate, did a whole bunch of functional medicine certifications along the way, stem cells, IV training, trigger point injection therapies. all sorts of. I mean, I'm always studying, still studying
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah, man. I'm curious, given that it just sounds like a lot of what you do goes against the traditional healthcare system that we've created.
Totally.
Like, do you find yourself in disagreement with a lot of doctors that you meet?
I have patients coming in sometimes, and I can't say this to the patients, but sometimes I'm like, I think your doctor's trying to kill you, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes it is that bad, and not necessarily like I will never tell a patient, hey, don't take your medications, don't listen to
Yeah.
your doctor, because one, I'd lose my license, and two, it'd be irresponsible. But often we work with patients and work with their doctors to kind of integrate it to see like, well, what can I do to complement what the doctor is doing for you so you can get better results. Ideally, it's not that we have anything against what the doctors are doing, but when it comes to chronic care, they really only give you medications to kind of cover up your symptoms. None of
Hmm.
the medications doctors give you are meant to treat or reverse or actually help the root cause of the condition get better. So
Yeah.
we work in tandem with the doctors until the patients get good enough where they can ideally either ask the doctor to wean them off the medication or they just don't need it anymore and all their symptoms and all their problems kind of go away. It really depends on it. It's a case by case basis.
Yeah. So why do you think that the approaches that you take, and if you could even go a little bit more into those approaches, like why do you think that those are able to actually get to the root cause more so than, any of the medication that's theoretically created to, alleviate what's wrong with us?
Well, the medications are not created for that. And the
Okay.
medicine we practice, whether it be traditional Eastern medicine or even through the functional medicine, which is very much designed like the Eastern medicine, is specifically made to get to the root cause, right? So the root cause, when we're talking about, excuse me, we deal with everything from lifestyle, diet, hydration, sleep, exercise, right? So all those things a lot of times will address root causes. So if somebody has some kind of systemic internal inflammation, like where's that coming from? If I could give you anti-inflammatories, which are going to destroy your gut or your liver or your kidneys or something else, eventually, or cause bone loss or whatever kind of things these medications are doing these days to people, but that doesn't address what the inflammation is. So if we find that the inflammation is from a toxin that you're ingesting, maybe it's a hygiene product, maybe it's food that you're eating, or maybe you're just chronically dehydrated, maybe you're super stressed out and you're doing nothing for stress management. Um, and a lot of times, it's a combination of all these factors. You will not likely find one smoking gun that's like, aha, that was
Hmm.
this is a silver bullet. Just like one medication isn't going to fix anything. So we have to go to an individual's whole lifestyle, all these things, and then we might prescribe. Let's say they have a nutrient deficiency, right? That's another factor, right? So we might have to prescribe certain nutrients to them or supplements, and then certain herbs might help, certain exercises. So it's when you look at all these factors, which doctors don't have time to and they're not trained to do,
Hmm.
right? So when we do that, you actually can address root causes and people do get better and they stay better.
Yeah. Do you think that like the body truly does have the ability to sort of completely be fine and like not need any sort of medication or like any of these sort of like daily supplements if we're just able to actually like live a lifestyle that is, congruent with how, basically what we need as human beings, or like will there always be some sort of herb, some sort of vitamin that we should always sort of be taking?
It's a good question and a complex answer, right? So
Yeah.
medications are a fairly new thing, right? We didn't
Yeah.
have um, pharmaceutical, chemical based medications up until the last, I don't know, 100 years or so, right? Excuse me. I had a little leftover respiratory thing. I'm good. As far as supplements and nutrients, ideally we wouldn't need them. However, I found that most of us past the age of 30 do need them. And that is a product of the environment. That is a product of the food system we have today. While our great grandparents were eating things right off the land that wasn't, factory farmed and were working outside, outdoors mostly, perhaps they were able to get by without the nutrients, right?
Hmm.
Nowadays, I find that most people were just not getting the nutrient load that we need, and It's it's a combination of the soil, the air, pollution,
The processing.
stress. Yeah, the processed foods. But even if you eat all organic, even if you eat a super healthy diet, a lot of us are still not getting the nutrients that we need. So I think there are certain things that work. And listen, and if you're perfectly healthy and you have no complaints and you feel great, then you probably shouldn't and don't need to take anything. And as a herbalist, that's how we're trained in traditional Chinese medicine. You do not take any herbs that you don't need,
Hmm.
because while the side effects might be low and while they might be good for you, it's still medicine, and you just don't take medicine you don't need.
Yeah. I really like that approach. I think that that's the approach that that more people should be taking. It's just, I mean, it's so interesting, like me not being in that system, but like the way that
Mm.
I see it is, doctors don't really make money unless they're prescribing medications and unless they're seeing patients on a constant basis. Like that's how the system was created. I don't know if it was intentionally created that way, but it's sort
Yes.
of now just this like out of control behemoth that, if we actually, talking about getting to the root causes of things with us, well, let's get to the root cause of like the healthcare system. I mean,
Mm.
our GDP as America probably just goes down significantly if we don't have this insane behemoth of a system just constantly running and working in the
You
background. Like it's inflating
you
itself.
nailed it.
Yeah.
You nailed it. It's true, and I think most doctors are at least got started for the right reasons,
Hmm.
right? But it is a business, right?
Yeah.
And if you work for a corporate or you work for a hospital for a big chain, you're accountable. You need to see a certain amount of patients. You need to, you got to follow their standards of care, their protocols, all that kind of stuff. If you're running a private practice, which they're shrinking because they're getting bought up by big chains. If you're running a private practice, you have to make money, right?
Yeah.
And it's you keep patients coming, and I don't think most doctors are prescribing for the money, but
Hmm.
are they completely clueless to the fact that if the patient doesn't need the prescription, that they're not going to come see them anymore?
Yeah.
No. The other problem is there's so much marketing of pharmaceuticals on television that people are coming to the doctors asking for the drugs. They're telling the doctors what they want prescribed,
Yeah.
which is insane. And then what happens is if the doctor says no, what do you think is going to happen?
They're going to go to a different doctor and find somebody who will.
Yeah, probably after they leave them a bad review or something,
Hmm.
right? So it's almost like the doctors are got one hand tied behind their back, even if they're trying to do the right thing, even if they have that philosophy. It's very very difficult, and there are a lot of good doctors, but the ones that are kind of conservative and have this kind of view on it are very far and few between, and a lot of these issues, and I see this with my patients. Sometimes the doctors are so looking for like the funky condition, or they're just trained to look for what medication, and they're
Hmm.
not asking basic questions. I mean, I've had MDs and nurses come in and they don't drink water.
Yeah.
Like literally,
Like
do
they're just
not,
not
like
hydrated.
zero. And they're like, "Why do I have eczema?" And it's like, "Well, what are you drinking every day? It's 6 coffees and 4 diet sodas." And I'm like, "How the f are you even alive? Like, I wouldn't make one day. I'd be dead, dead. I couldn't survive."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, I've been doing it for 20, 30." I'm like, "Didn't you go to medical school? Did they not teach you this?" I'm like, "Stop looking for an answer that doesn't exist. Just look in the mirror and like look at the basics, dude. Like, you eat one meal a day. Why are you so tired? You're hungry."
Yeah.
Like your blood sugar is low. It's obvious.
Yeah. Do you ever find it a struggle like with patients that come in and like for lifestyle changes like that, they're
Yeah.
looking for like what's the one little magic pill that, the magic pill or the magic bullet that you can give me right now that's just going to make me better. Like, I don't want to go through all of these different changes. Like, you're telling me now I need to get 8 hours of sleep a night. I need to eat 3 meals a day. I need to make sure I'm drinking all this water. Like, I just don't have the time to do that. Like, give me something else.
So, good question. And the answer is you have to meet the patients where they're at, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to deny them care, but I will never lie to them. I'm not going
Yeah.
to tell them this is the magic pill that's going to fix all your problems, right? Like, will a multivitamin help you if you're malnourished? Yeah, probably. Is it going to replace food? No.
Hmm.
Right. So you just got to be honest and upfront with them. And I tell them, listen, you need to prioritize your health. You have these issues. Whatever you've been doing isn't working. You're coming here for advice. I'm giving you the advice. If you don't listen to it, don't get upset if it doesn't work, right? And then some patients are like, forget that. I'll find somebody else who'll
Yeah.
lie to me, right? And then they just don't come back. A lot of people are willing to make the changes. And what I've learned the hard way, and it is very frustrating at first, and a lot of practitioners take this home with them, and I've learned not to, is one, you can't save everyone.
Yeah.
If you don't want to listen, you're on your own. I'm going to get, and you know what? If they follow their advice, we have an incredibly high success rate, probably 80 to 90%, even with chronic pain and diseases, incredibly high. The ones that don't listen usually don't get the results. And
Hmm.
occasionally you try everything for a patient and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
That is far and few in between, though. Like normally, if they follow the guidelines, like they're going to get better. We have experience with this. We have protocols. We have thousands of years of research on some of this stuff. I mean, we have case studies literally from thousands of years ago, actual case studies, medical records. And then we have a lot of new research in the functional medicine field on nutrients and things like that. It's very simple. Like if you have a B12 deficiency or a vitamin D deficiency, like that's a fact. You need that nutrient, right? You
Yeah.
can't survive well without it, and if you're borderline and you're not thriving, well, maybe being 2 points above the minimum amount you should have to survive is not good for you.
Yeah.
But the doctor's not going to say anything because they're looking for red flags. They're looking for what's an emergency and what can I refer to, the ER, or what drugs can I give. They're not looking at
Hmm.
those kinds of things.
What are I'm curious, what are some of the most like common general conditions or like things that you typically see people coming in for that can be changed with relatively simple lifestyle changes?
um Good question. It's all over the map, and most of the things can be changed with relatively stuff. Um, Everything from headaches to GI stuff, right? Whether it be like Crohn's, colitis, bloating, acid reflux, a lot of the digestive stuff, a lot of women's health issues like endometriosis, PCOS,
Hmm.
um, fertility issues, fibroids. Mm, what else? I mean, even sometimes more complex things like rheumatoid arthritis, and then pain. A lot of times, some very simple exercises might fix it. So we give them the right therapeutic exercises. A lot of times that'll fix it, or uh, possibly some myofascial release techniques that they could use at home, or just like a few acupuncture sessions will sometimes relieve 10, 20 years worth of pain. It's
Yeah.
insane how often things are misdiagnosed by medical doctors, by ER doctors, even orthopedics. I have patients come in with, let's say, a frozen shoulder, and they were recommended to get neck surgery by the doctor. And I'm like, well, did they do an orthopedic exam to test the muscles of your rotator cuff? Did they check your supraspinatus and your infra and your subscapularis? And they're like, no, they never touched me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so I'm doing the orthopedic examination that the orthopedic should have done, but they referred you to spinal surgery that they were going to do, of course, and make
Yeah.
150 grand on. And they didn't think to at least do a 3-minute physical exam first,
Hmm.
right? So it's scary out there. The
Yeah.
system, it's a for-profit system. Do I think we should be socialized? Probably not. I don't know that works well either.
Yeah.
There's got to be something in the middle. I just know what we're doing now is
The middle
very,
way.
very broken. Yeah.
What I'm curious, what role do you think that trauma plays in a lot of the issues that people have and that people come in with?
Ooh, huge. Depends. Now, hmm, we all have trauma to different
Hmm.
extents, right? So, uh, if my teacher yelled at me as a kid, that's not going to be the same as somebody else's trauma that went to war, or somebody who's been through, physical or sexual abuse or something like that. But we do internalize it, and that can manifest in things as like OCD behaviors that might be harmful, or overeating, or eating things that might be wrong for you, or other or are self-medicating, right, with things that might be okay in a occasional setting, but if you're doing it in an overabundance, right, anything that's out of moderation has a potential to do harm. Right? Actually,
Hmm.
any substance or anything you put in has the potential to do harm, but right, let's say alcohol. We all know it will kill you. You will
Yeah.
die if you drink too much alcohol. You'll ruin your family. You'll ruin your liver. Right? Is alcohol inherently bad? No. If you're a responsible drinker, if I have a glass of wine with my family on Friday nights, like,
Yeah.
is that doing any damage? No. Right? Tinctures, right? Whether we're talking about mushroom tinctures or other herbal tinctures, distilled in an alcohol, right? Is a few drops going to be bad for you? No, it's a carrier. It's been used medicinally for thousands of years. The ancient Egyptians were using them. The Chinese were using them. The Greeks were using them. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you're drinking a six pack every day, you're not going to be in good shape, right?
Yeah. It's how the body works. So I want to take this transition into psychedelics a little bit and talk about, I guess, your experience. When did psychedelics enter your life, and when did you really start kind of getting interested in them?
30 years ago, I
30
was,
years ago. Okay. How old are
I
you?
was, I'll be 44 in a couple months.
Okay, got it. So you were you
So
were you were pretty young.
I started experimenting at 14. I think
Uh-huh.
the first thing I tried was LSD, and I think some kid at school was like, "Hey, I got some acid. Do you want some?" And I was like, "Yes." I
Absolutely.
think I was just very curious. You know, I was open to
Yeah.
trying different things. I had a horrible experience, and I fell in love with it. And and
Uh-huh.
um and after high school, I left it alone for a long time. I
Yeah.
probably left it alone for 10, 15 plus years,
Oh,
other
wow.
than occasional very occasionally some mushrooms for ceremonial purposes or something that I had going on. And then the last 8, 9 years, I've just been watching all the research, right, and being in the medical field and having these cases of extreme trauma or extreme anxiety or people that are suicidal. And I have an extremely high success rate with anxiety and panic attacks and depression with what I do, with the herbal medicine and the acupuncture and the functional medicine. Very high success rate. But some cases, just nothing helps, right? These are
Hmm.
cases that we would consider probably like treatment resistant depression. They've tried all the medications, they've tried talk therapy, doesn't help. They still deserve help. Now, I've also always been interested in what it does for you on the creative side.
Hmm.
Once again, I told you I'm into the arts. I paint. I have many fond memories of dropping and then spending 8 hours drawing. Right, like
Yeah.
it's So I think it's very interesting on what it does on the performance side. But I think we're seeing legalization and medicalization come in now because of the scientific research that's been attached to these things, and because
Hmm.
of how successful that scientific research has been, and because of the fact that it's more successful when it goes up against the drugs or just traditional talk therapy. All the studies, for the most part, are showing that and I'm talking about psychedelics in general, whether you're talking about ketamine or mushrooms or LSD or MDMA. When you put these compounds against the traditional SSRIs or whatever else they've been prescribing, the research is mind blowing, right?
Yeah.
Literally. But it shows that it's more where they're having a higher percentage of success with these resistant depressions and anxieties and PTSD than the pharmaceuticals and the talk therapy alone have. And it's way cheaper. Once again, going back to our GDP, saving us a ton of money, because mental health, we spend a lot of money on mental health and it's often misdiagnosed and causes all these other problems. Two, a lot of times a very short treatment protocol will fix the problem permanently. Or you look at people like a year or two later, I think with
Hmm.
the psilocybin, you see sometimes 2 doses. A year later, people are still fine,
Yeah.
right? Ketamine, I think the average thing is like 6 treatments over 3 weeks. 3 weeks,
Hmm.
problem solved, right? For like 70% of the cases or something, which is much higher success rate than
Yeah.
some of these other things. So I've been advocating for people to have rights to get into this, and I've been working with some ketamine providers. I've been referring out to ketamine providers. Now I'm going to be partner and working in opening the New Path Clinic in Delray Beach, because this is saving people's lives. And I've had suicidal patients that I've referred out to ketamine
Hmm.
after everything else has failed, including me with my other therapies. And literally, I had a parent that told me, "Oh, well, my kid's not suicidal anymore. Now he's in college. He has a job. He still has some general anxiety, but like no more suicidal ideation." So like
Yeah. That's
And
huge.
yeah, it's huge is an
That's
understatement,
fucking
right?
huge. Like that's
Yeah,
fucking insane.
it couldn't get any bigger than that, right? And I'm a parent of young children. I couldn't even imagine if that was my child going through it, or my wife or a family member. I would want them to have that option, right? And it should be reimbursed by insurance to a rate where everybody's happy, and it's kind of fair to everybody, because these treatments are very expensive. Like to go
Hmm.
to do ketamine treatments, it's not cheap, right? And not everybody has access to that. And sometimes the people who have the least amount of income might be the people who need this kind of thing the most.
Why do you think insurance like hasn't been quick to want to cover these types of therapies?
Well, that is changing. They just did make an was it a CPT code for psychedelic assisted therapies,
Hmm.
which is going into play, I believe, in 2024, which means they are considering it, and there are insurance companies that are considering it. I think it's gonna be a long time. I think a lot part of with the insurance game is they got to wait and see the research for everything to get through phase 3 clinical trials. It's a newer thing, and two, part of it is going to be, I think, big corporate grip on
Hmm.
what they could do. Because that being said, all the big pharmaceutical companies and all the corporations, they're all over the psychedelics. They're invested
Yeah.
in research. They're patenting whatever they can to keep their grip on it. But they see it's changing, and I think that will change. Will it be where we all think it should be and where we all want it to be? We'll see. It might not be
Hmm.
there. It might not ever be what we'd like to see, but I think it's gonna be very interesting in the next few years to kind of track this.
Yeah. I want to talk too. So I know that you've submitted a couple sessions to speak at Wonderland Conference
Hmm.
in Miami that's coming up in November. I submitted something as well. So this is, I guess, a quick shout out. Everybody, go vote for all of the sessions that we've
Totally.
submitted, so we could do that. But one of them that I specifically wanted to talk about that you submitted was about psilocybin versus the DEA and right
Hmm.
to try laws. And I know that you've been working with some lawyers. So just tell me about sort of the work that you're doing there. Explain what right to try laws are for anybody listening that might not know.
So I'll start with the right to try laws, and then I'll explain a little bit about the case and the petition itself. So there is a federally, and most of the states have these national statutes saying that if a patient is dying, they have a right to try any medication who's already passed phase 1 clinical trials and has been found to be safe and effective. Okay. So psilocybin is actually going into phase 3 clinical trials. It's been found to be safe and extremely effective, but they're still being denied to the patients. It's not, the DA refuses to let people have them.
How
So
does a
there is
patient even, I guess, even like before this, how does a patient even like apply to want, to get psilocybin legally, like in the first place? Like, what does that process even look like?
That's a great question, and I do not have a DA
Okay.
number since my doctorate is actually in acupuncture and Eastern medicine. So
Okay.
that would probably be a question for somebody else. I'm assuming the provider would have to refer them, or they'd have to go to the company, I believe, that is doing the clinical trials,
Hmm.
and ask them for the medication,
Hmm.
right? So, but there's a doctor by the name of Sunil Agarwal, and he's the one that started this whole process. And it's the AIMS 3 appeal is this one that I was a part of, and this is his third appeal to the DEA. And he's been working with a firm called Hush Blackwell, and they put this together. And the DEA refused to even listen to the case, right? Even though this has gone through, like I said, the clinical trials and all that. So I'm being represented in it by two attorneys out of New Jersey, Joseph Shapiro and Dan McKillop, who brought me into it as one of the physicians. And for this third appeal, they were looking for a bunch of clinicians and physicians to kind of sign on and share their experiences. And Joseph and I happened to be speaking because I spoke on a panel. Actually, I was moderating a panel on psychedelics in the law at Canadelic, which is another big event that happens down here in Miami. And they tapped me to moderate this panel, and I called Joseph, who was somebody I met through the field, and we started speaking. And I was like, help me out here. The legal thing is not my expertise. You're the attorney,
Yeah.
and he's like, well, he's like, you might be interested in this. We're currently working on this. We're looking for other doctors who want to be represented. So he told me the whole thing, and I said, it's kind of scary because you're putting your name on to go against the DEA and sign on to it. And who knows if there'll be repercussions or not? Hopefully not, because we're doing this for the right reasons. I mean, we just want patients to have access, and
Yeah.
these are patients that are dying. So they told me about what was going on, and I read through the petition, and I actually submitted some information that was included in there. So it was nice that I was actually able to help shape some of that language besides just signing my name. I noticed that the Compass Phase 2 trials weren't in there, so they said, "Listen, you need to add that because this isn't just Phase 1. We've already passed Phase 2 clinical
Yeah.
trials and going into Phase 3." So they added that, and this was based mostly for end of life patients that were I believe, from AIDS and for cancer. And I said,
Hmm.
which I understand, but I think there's a lot of other conditions that are also end of life, right?
Yeah.
Whether it be MS or Parkinson's or, veterans that are committing suicide, for severe depression, that all needs to be included in there. And first they came back and said, well, there's a separate one for the veterans. I said, I don't care, just put it in there, right? I
Yeah.
think we should mention all these other, because it's very easy to sweep like AIDS patients or cancer patients, like, oh, they're dying anyway, like just
Yeah.
under the rug. I said, but there's so many end of life issues. What if it's a cardiac condition? Whatever it is, like if people end their life, they should have the option to this medication, just like anybody else should. So we petitioned the DEA. It went into the Ninth Circuit Court, which is just one level below the Supreme Court. Still waiting to hear what happens with the case. So
Mm.
we'll keep everybody updated with that. But I would love to thank Dr. Sunil Agarwal that started the whole thing, the team at Hush Blackwell that's been handling the whole thing, and the attorneys representing me, which are Joseph Shapiro and Dan McKillop,
Yeah.
out of the New Jersey State Psychedelic Bar Association. I think they have a group over there. They're very involved with cannabis and psychedelics out of the state over there.
That's awesome, man. I'm excited to see where that goes. I mean, I think
It's a step.
it exactly. It's a step one that needs to be taken, and like it makes me really really happy knowing that there are people out there that are fighting for these things and that are taking those steps that I myself probably just don't have the patience to want to do. I'm much more of a, just kind of do things and just,
Well,
see what happens afterwards. I'll accept
we're
the
all in it
repercussions.
together. You're
Yeah.
doing your part. You're educating people. You're sharing this good information. So I think it's going to take teamwork, and it's going to take people to really rise up and be like, enough is enough. We have access to all these drugs that aren't helping. We want access to some drugs that might help.
Yeah. Taking a step back even just about the whole legalization of
Hmm.
psychedelics. I think something that actually does bother me a little bit is the fact, and actually Dennis Walker, he published something in High Times today that
Yeah,
kind
I
of
saw it.
talked about this, but the fact that it's being pushed just in such a medicalized way, like that these
Yeah.
are only becoming legalized because they have medical purpose, and that's the only reason they should be legalized. And now there's all these pharmaceutical companies that are creating their own novel compounds that they can then patent for, again, therapeutic purposes, or for whatever, where I think that misses a lot of the narrative, in the sense that these never should have been, made Schedule 1 in the first place. And just the sheer amount of misinformation that still genuinely exists about them. Like, again, I can go out and drink alcohol and get as fucked up as I want in a bar with a thousand other people that are doing the exact same thing and getting fucked up. But if I go and take mushrooms in public, like, I'm seen as somebody who does drugs and is crazy. But
Well, one.
yeah, sorry, you go.
Well, I was gonna say one. I want to give Dennis a shout out. He's a good friend, and he's interviewed me as well. And brilliant writer, and the micropreneur is probably my favorite thing that I follow on Instagram because he's funny as shit.
Yeah, after trip sitting
Um,
blog, of course.
of course, but no, he's brilliant. He does really good work, and his commentary, not only on the funny side, he's very intelligent guy and very well spoken on the subject. And he's right, and that was my biggest gripe that I saw with the industry after I spoke at Wonderland last year was like everybody's pushing drugs, 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 but I didn't see enough people really discussing or working on the integration aspects of it, which is far more important than any of the
90 to
compounds
95% of the
at
work is
all.
going to be what you do afterwards.
Or you were just doing that in the first place,
Yeah.
80% of these people wouldn't have any problems to begin with, right? And
Yeah.
that's what we talked about, the lifestyle factors and all that. That eliminates most people's issues right off the bat. So it is upsetting, and it's a shame, and it's a shame that some of the cultural and the religious aspects are being lost. Um, but I think there's enough good people that are fighting for that too.
Hmm.
And at all these conferences, there is some recognition to the indigenous and the cultural aspects of it. So I'm glad to see it. I'm one of those people that's pushing for the integration. Um, Listen, if that's what it takes, if that's what it takes. I mean, personally, I think it should just be legalized and not medicalized. And
Yeah.
I think the same thing about cannabis because, once again, if you can't afford to take off work and pay the doctor and pay for insurance, and the insurance isn't covering it, and then look, just grow your own stuff at home and do what you got to do, right?
Yeah.
It's
I can go buy
who's
an eighth of
there's
mushrooms for $35.
Yeah, or growing home for nothing, right? Or, exactly. So why should you have to pay $3,500 or
Uh-huh.
$350 to get a license, and then 150 for the doctor's visit, and then a couple $100 every time, and then be taxed on it? Like, I mean, but you can grow tomatoes. Like, what's the
Hmm.
difference, right? So tomatoes are medicine too, right? They kill cancer. They have all sorts of other medicinal properties. Mint is a medicinal herb. You can grow that just as easily. So I agree. It's frustrating, but I think it's also a step forward. And that's corporate America for you. So
Yeah.
should we be surprised? No. Should we be mad about it? Yeah. Should we do more than just talk about it? Yeah, but it starts somewhere, and that's why it's important we all vote. And actually, let me ask you a question: how many of your Congress people have you contacted in regards to supporting
I've
these things?
contacted absolutely zero of them. I do live in Denver though, and I do know that we at least are ahead of most of the game when it comes to
Totally
one, psychedelics already decriminalized here. Granted, I did move here
right.
relatively recently because I lived in Illinois before.
Okay.
And I knew some people there that actually were again doing some of that work. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, again, like I'm not doing the groundwork. I'm not
So that's
again.
part of the problem. I mean,
Yeah.
you're educating, but you should also be educating all your listeners, and you personally taking responsibility and accountability to reach out to elected officials, and maybe not so much in your state anymore,
Yeah.
but we everybody needs to advocate. You can't wait for a doctor like Sunil Agarwal or for us
Hmm.
or for everybody else to do it and then just sit around and complain about it and talk about it.
Yeah.
We gotta take action. So whatever that looks like, I think by any means necessary, we need to really step up. All of us can do more. Every
Yeah.
single one of us.
Yeah. It's, I guess not that I think this is right or wrong necessarily, but I go more of the sort of chaos approach. Whereas if you simply just have enough people doing it, it forces the people at the top to just realize that, okay, something does need to change here. Whether or not, again, that's the right approach or not, that's a completely different argument. But I just personally have more fun with that
I
one.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you shouldn't do that,
Yeah.
but we can all do more, right?
No, I do agree, and again, it's this is why I like having these conversations with people like you to actually understand, you and many other people are the people that are actually doing it the way that is going to get it pushed through in the shitty bureaucratic system that we have right now. That whether or not I agree with the system, it is the system that is in place, and we do have to find
Yeah.
a way to
We,
work with that system in order to ultimately get the goal that we're trying to achieve.
you got to play the game.
Yeah. Um, moving again, one of the other sessions that I actually really want to talk about that that you submitted again. You don't have to get the whole
Mhm.
talk right now, but it's on Taoist emotional cleansing techniques. I know absolutely nothing about that whatsoever, so I want to start from the beginning. What the fuck does that mean?
Come to Wonderland and take the workshop.
Okay, well,
uh,
obviously, I want to,
I'll
but it
give
has
you.
to, has
We
to
got
get
to
accepted
entice you.
first.
You need a little
Yeah. So give
information.
people
All
a
right.
sneak peek.
So, are you familiar with qigong and all?
No.
So qigong is looks very much like tai chi. I think everybody's kind of heard of tai chi or can
Hmm.
kind of visualize tai chi in their mind, right? Well, most people don't understand. There you go, master.
Yeah.
um, so tai chi, what people don't realize, is actually a martial art intended for fighting. and self-defense.
Yeah.
Every single movement is for fighting, although it's not always taught that way in the West and other places. It's thought of more for health purposes. Um, Qigong is specifically movements and breath work and visualizations. That's the important part. Visualizations and awareness of the chi, of what's happening with the energy flow inside the body.
So
That's specifically,
chi is energy.
that's a very simple way to put it, but
Mm-hmm.
yes, and which is extremely scientific. For anybody who doesn't believe in it, then they don't believe in science, because our body is all energy,
Well, a
right?
lot of
There's
people in America don't believe in science at the moment.
unfortunately, that's true for all sorts of reasons across the board. Um, doesn't matter what side you land in, it
Yeah.
seems like in
Mm-hmm.
general, nobody's using critical thinking these days. And they're just kind of going by whatever the TV tells them, regardless of what station they watch. So yes, but I mean, we're full of electrons. We're thermal energy. The body's warm. We make sounds. That's sound energy. There's nitric oxide that's going through the body, right? There's all sorts of electrical impulses in the body, right? The heart works on electricity. There's chemical reactions. Your hormone system is chemical reactions. Your digestion is all chemical reactions. It's all energy, right? So part of it is having an awareness of this energy and an awareness of the breath. That's the other part of it. The chi is energy, but it's also the breath. So it's like a combination of where the breath meets the rest of the energy and kind of spreads to the body. So some people look at it, like I said, as the gases like nitric oxide. Sometimes we look at it as more like electrical energy, like piezoelectricity and static and other electrical impulses in the body. But it's that. So it's getting in tune with the energy and learning how to move it at will. And there's different meridians that affect different organs. And from the traditional Eastern culture, from specifically traditional Chinese medicine, they have a every meridian or acupuncture channel is associated with different emotions and different organs as well. So what I'm teaching, and this is the Taoists use this traditionally, and the Taoists, I guess the most well-known Taoist place you could think of is probably Wudong Mountain, which is where Wu Tang got their name from. It's actually
Mm.
pronounced Dong, but that they and that is where Tai Chi is said to have come from. So they have these very esoteric practices that are kind of like spiritual cleansing and emotional cleansing, where we're using physical movements and using our intention, which is the yi, to move the chi. So we're using your intention to move chi, induce specific things, and cleanse any blockages in the body, whether there
Mm-hmm.
be blockages of physical blockages of blood not flowing properly, or stagnant emotions, if you have repressed emotions, or emotions that are overwhelming or out of balance. So we're
Mm-hmm.
using these specific techniques that have been used for thousands of years to cleanse and balance our emotions.
So that's basically, again, like when we have, I mean, not even necessarily just trauma, but like when we don't want to feel a certain emotion, that can get stuck in our body and basically blocked there. And this would be a way to sort of clear that block and let that move through us.
Yes, and from personal experience, if you're going through this process on psychedelics, it's like times 100.
Yeah.
It's just like, because I'm talking about like the process I'm describing, it has all these visualizations, right? So you're doing it with your eyes closed, and we're talking about colors and organs and releasing things with the
And
breath, and it's just
feeling every little tiny thing, which
it's it's incredible. It's an incredible experience, with or without the psychedelics. It's just amplified on psychedelics, and I think it just kind of fits into the space. And nobody's really doing this in the space. I'm one of the first people to actually to bring it in and be a proponent for it. So I'm glad to be able to share it with people, and I hope more and more people will join, and we can kind of grow it. It's just an incredibly powerful integration practice that
Mhm.
I think, just like yoga is, right?
Yep.
And you see all these regimes like yoga, yoga, yoga. There's a lot more than just yoga, and
Yeah.
yoga is another fascinating Eastern practice, very watered down in the West.
Yep.
Most of the way we practice is not anything like what the yogis were doing or has anything to do with the Vedic text. There are lots of good practitioners and there are lots of good schools, but most of the stuff has been whitewashed and is
Hmm.
mostly physical fitness at this point.
Yeah. How much of a crossover do you see between like a lot of the like Eastern healing techniques and a lot of the integration work that we talk about specifically with psychedelics overlapping?
So a lot of the meditation techniques come from the East, right?
Yeah.
So everybody's talking, oh, mindfulness, and another thing that's kind of totally been like
Watered
whitewashed,
down.
right? But I mean, all that stuff more or less comes from the East, whether you're talking about from ancient Egypt or or China or the Taoists or all that, or the Buddhists or Hinduism. I mean, it all kind of originates out that way. Um, that being said, the Native Americans and the indigenous people in the Americas also have their own practices too. So that might
Mhm.
be a little off. But the practices we use today in the integration are from the East. And there is yogas put into a lot of this as well. So all the breathing techniques, most of that comes from the East as well. And I'm not saying the indigenous Americans didn't have these practices; they did, but
Mhm.
most of the ones we're using come from the East.
Yeah.
Okay,
Much more
so
well
it is.
documented.
Totally. It's yeah, and right where most of the native traditions were kind of orally passed down,
Mhm.
and we didn't have this kind of documentation going back 2,000 years. We know it existed. We know
Yeah.
they were doing it, and there is evidence of that. We just don't have it well documented, and they weren't as open to sharing with
Yeah.
outsiders, right? And even to this day, I have a lot of friends, within native cultures, they won't tell you certain stories about their ancestors. It's like if you're not part of the tribe, it's
Mhm.
don't ask. That's
Yeah.
just how it is, right? So I think it's huge. I mean, and even in functional medicine, which is totally westernized now too, but it's just kind of like we're using labs and blood work to assess people and then get them the right vitamins and nutrients.
Mhm.
But all the questions in the intake process are pretty much the exact same questions that they were writing about 2,000 years ago, documented from
That's
the Eastern
crazy.
traditions. Exact same questions. Do
That's
you have night
awesome.
sweats? Do you have what are your bowel movements like? What's your
Mhm.
period like? The ancient Egyptians and the Chinese, they had this stuff documented. They were asking these same questions, same intakes.
Wow. It's awesome. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for your time. I guess before we go, I guess, is there any other thing that you'd like to promote or tell people about or anything that you haven't touched on?
No, I think everybody should just keep an open mind. If anyone wants to reach out and if they need any help, you could find me like on Insta or at Facebook, just at Jonathan M Fields, the way my name is spelled down here in the corner. And I'll send you my infos if you want to put it in the post. I'm happy to help. I'm happy to talk. I love hearing from people. I try to respond to everybody. And if you're in Florida, check out some of our retreats. Check us out the New Path Center that we're opening, and if you're coming down to Wonderland, please support all these events that are happening around the country. Cameron, you coming to Wonderland?
If I get
We'll see.
accepted,
Maybe. Okay.
absolutely.
So it depends on that. All
Yeah, yeah,
right.
pretty much depends on that.
Well,
But
I'm gonna vote for you.
awesome, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, also too, I'll
Beautiful.
be linking to everything in the footnotes of this podcast. So if
Beautiful.
anyone's interested,
Fantastic.
just go there. But thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate it. This was an awesome conversation. Much love to you, brother. I appreciate everything you do.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And thank you once again to Dr. Jonathan Fields for coming on the podcast and expressing your opinions and sharing your knowledge. Now, if anybody is interested in collaborating with me, please feel free to shoot me a DM on any of my socials. Send me an email, which is tripsittingblog@gmail.com. And then also too, if you have any opinions or thoughts, please reach out to me and let me know. Whatever you're thinking. I always love talking to people. So thank you once again for listening, and we will see you next episode.